If there's anyone in here tonight who's not from the UK, give yourselves a big round of applause. Where are you from? You're from Syria, aren't you? Good. You're from Syria. I'm from the UK. And, of course, we're all from the world. And, you know, I'm really worried about our world. I'm really worried about our future. Why am I worried? I'm worried because today we live in a globalized society. There are over 7 billion of us on the planet. And while globalization has brought many benefits to the world, it's also bringing increasing problems. And I kind of feel that if we're going to not just survive as a species, but also thrive on this planet, we're going to have to collectively grow up. Because when I read the news in the newspapers or I watch the news on TV, I feel a lot of pain. I feel pain at the poverty I see around the world. I feel pain at the destruction caused by a tsunami. I feel pain at the destruction that climate change is beginning to wreak on natural habitats. And I feel pain at the hardship that ordinary people around the world are beginning to suffer because of chaotic global financial markets. But no sooner do I feel that pain, I find myself pushing it away. I kind of switch TV channels or whatever. Because it's not just the pain of these things, it's the powerlessness that I feel at not really being able to do very much about it. And perhaps like you know, I give to charities and I give to disaster relief and so forth, but I kind of wonder whether that's really solving anything at all. I kind of wonder whether it's just salving my own conscience. And these kind of pain avoidance strategies kind of remind me of when I was a child, because as children, that's what we do. We avoid pain, we just get on with it, we put on a happy face and carry on. We don't even realize that's what we're doing. But a few years ago, when my marriage failed, like a slap in the face, I realized I had to take responsibility. I had to face up to my issues. I had to grow up. So I kind of wonder if that analogy resonates with you as to how we as a society collectively are avoiding facing up to the global issues that are confronting us. So who could we look to for inspiration as we face these seemingly daunting issues? Who could we look to see us through? Well, my choice would be this guy here, Albert Einstein, the big man, the great scientist. Because perhaps his most famous saying of all was, "We won't solve present problems with the same thinking that created them." Now, what did he actually mean by that? I think what he meant was that our current problems, including the global problems I've been talking about, are just symptoms of our inadequate thinking. And so, if we're going to solve these problems, the first thing that has to change is the way we think. But how do we think? Well, ever since the Enlightenment, the way we think is called rational thinking. And in a political context, I would call it nation-centric thinking. And the way this kind of thinking works is that what we tend to do is we tend to break things down into parts to see how they work, to see how it all fits. But the downside of that kind of thinking is that we then tend to fail to see the whole. We see the parts, but not the whole. We see how each nation works, but we don't see how the whole world works. But how would we actually even recognize this thinking if we came across it in real life, day to day? Well, to help me explain, I'm going to introduce this guy here. This guy here is called Bob the Banker. Bob is the CEO of Big Bank Inc. He has a big house in a leafy suburb. He has big red braces underneath that jacket of his, probably. But what's for sure is he takes home a big, fat bonus. Now, of course, many of us are very angry at the obscene level of bonuses that our bankers are taking home. And we're even more angry with our government for not doing very much about it. But we're angry, I'm suggesting, because we're actually still thinking nation-centrically. We're still looking at our banks and not at all banks globally. We're looking at our bobs and not all bobs globally. So how would this problem of bankers' bonuses look if we were to look at it through Einstein's eyes? How would it look if we were, instead of to use nation-centric thinking, could somehow employ what I'm calling world-centric thinking? How would it look then? Well, if we used world-centric thinking, I think we'd not just see, but we'd deeply understand that the banks today operate as part of a global market. Whether it's banks in Wall Street, in the City of London, in Syria, Hong Kong, or anywhere else, they are part of a global market. And that means that if HSBC failed to pay top dollar, top bonuses to its top people, it would only lose those people to some other bank somewhere else. So bankers may be greedy, or they may not be. That's not really the issue. The issue is that they're actually in a global market where they can't afford to lose out to their competition. And so when we start to see world-centrically, we start to see that this is a problem that can only be dealt with at the global level. We start to see that if we have a global economy, which we do, we are not going to make it just or sustainable unless we also have global governance. Now, I guess many of you will be sensing or feeling in yourselves, global governance, oh, for God's sake, that's never going to happen. But don't dismiss it out of hand just yet, because I just want to go back for a minute to nation-centric thinking. Because, like I said, nation-centric rational thinking, if you like, started back with the Enlightenment. And in fact, the nation-state system started with the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648. But if we were to go back even further to a time during the Middle Ages, before the nation-state system even started, and if we imagine we're in an ale house in Bloomsbury here and we were having a pint together, a pint of mead or whatever they used to drink in those days, I don't know. And, I was saying to you, oh, God, our feudal lord is telling us to go off and fight another war. We only did one just last week. How can we raise our crops and graze our sheep? This is just crazy. What we really need is a nation-state system. Now, you probably have said to me, oh, come on, that'll never happen. But it did happen. And so here we are today at the beginning of the 21st century, and we're actually in much the same position, where nation-centric thinking and the nation-state system has kind of hit the limits of its capability. It's just not capable anymore of taking us where we need to go. And the problem with new thinking is that it's difficult. Moving from nation-centric thinking to world-centric thinking, it's difficult because new thinking is, the way we think, in fact, is a very deep part of who we are. And so to let go of our old way or our current way of thinking and to move to new thinking, it's like standing on a bungee jump. It's like looking down into the abyss and, whoa, we don't want to go there. Because I think there's another reason in this context we don't want to go there. Because all the while we hang on to nation-centric thinking, we can be self-righteous. We can play the blame game. We can blame our bankers for being greedy. And we can blame our politicians for not acting. But why is that? Well, to help me explain, this third gentleman here is David Cameron, as you well know. And I'm going to imagine now that I'm David Cameron in the study of number 10 as I wrestle with this issue of bankers' bonuses, because I know the people of Britain want me to act, decisively on this issue. And apart from the fact that these bankers are my cronies and they donate to the Tory party, the fact is whether they do or not, if I tax our banks more stringently than other countries, they're only going to move elsewhere. So they'll carry on pretty much as before, but Britain will lose out billions of pounds of tax revenue and thousands of jobs will be lost. So it's just not in Britain's interests to do this. And now, just imagine all the other prime ministers and presidents and chancellors around the world, because they're going through exactly the same thought process. So you can see, when we look at it world-centrically, you can see how this is a vicious circle. And is it any wonder then that neither bankers' bonuses, nor climate change, nor any other global issue is being addressed? Because our governments are stuck in a box. And so I say to you, why blame them? You see, when we think nation-centrically, we still secretly believe that our politicians have power. We place ourselves in a position of adolescent dependency. We think they're going to solve it for us. But when we move to world-centric thinking, we start to see that our politicians are stuck in a vicious circle that they can't get out of. And we start to see, therefore, that only some kind of global action will do, and that we citizens have to take the initiative. It's not that we can do it without our politicians, but rather than expecting the leaders to lead and the people to follow, what we have to realize is that the people, where the people lead, then the leaders will follow. We have to take responsibility. So, like Einstein said, we won't solve present problems with the same thinking that created them. And I believe that if we take this leap to world-centric thinking, which is scary, I believe that together we can find solutions that every citizen, business, and nation can support. A global solution which aligns each nation's self-interest with the global common interest. And so I believe that if we do this together, if we face up to these issues together, well, you never know what we could come up with. Thank you very much.